And now another one of my favorite entrepreneurs. We've been fortunate to work with Charles at Ariadne Capital and through Entrepreneur Country. I think really, although I knew Charles before, it was kind of roughly around 2008. And it's very interesting because with Sandy Carter here today and the shift of around cloud, social mobile, and what IBM is doing, and also earlier on the data center panel with Sarah Shields of Dell talking about that. The first person I really heard talk about this was Charles, because Charles founded a business called Nastar. And Nastar's vision was about hosted desktop, that everybody would, in the same way as Sabir Bhatia, one of our shareholders, told Tim Draper, I just think this idea of email being coupled with a device, your laptop, is really crazy. It's going to be detached. Charles had the same view that, good grief, why would you need to be anywhere? You have your hosted desktop, and it's all going to be in the cloud. And it made perfect sense to me. And so in 2008, we decided to work with Nastar to get rid of those silly IT people that were, supposedly doing our tech ops and all the rest of it. And Charles helped us bring Nastar into Ariadne Capital, and he successfully sold the business earlier this year. And he blows my whole theory that with every entrepreneur there's a theme and a variation, that entrepreneurs are kind of obsessed with a certain kind of problem set, and then they just keep on varying around that, because as you're going to hear, Charles is going to talk to us about the future of space. And I thought it was only appropriate at the end of the day for us to really get into the future of space. And he has some pretty important people that are backing and influencing him that he's built up relationships with. So I would like for the final session of the day for you to welcome Charles Black, the future of Sense Space Entertainment Exploration Network, to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, Charles Black.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. So this is the journey I'd like us to take. I've started in poem format, but right now we're moving at 66,000 miles an hour through space on a rocky planet around an average-sized star. That star is just one of about 100 billion in our galaxy, which is the Milky Way. We also know there's about 100 billion other galaxies that we know about. So space is a big place. Around the sun, there's 8 known planets, but there's also planets being discovered around other star systems. So nearly 2,000 planets, alien worlds, have been found orbiting stars in other solar systems, including Tatooine-like planets, like the fictional home planet of Luke Skywalker there, orbiting 2 suns. So there's examples at the bottom there of 2 planets, Kepler-47 and Kepler-34, which are known to actually orbit these binary stars. Space exploration began in the late 1950s. The first satellite was launched in 1957, Sputnik 1. And then, of course, the first human in space, Yuri Gagarin, on the 12th of April, 1961. And in the 1960s, it was very much, space was really an ideological battle between the Soviet Union and the USA, the race for the moon. So what's changed since then? What is this space 2.0 I put to make it sound trendy? So the first thing, there's a lot more countries involved with space exploration now. The European Space Agency, which involves about 20 or 30 member states. They're about to land a robot on a comet, which is going to be absolutely incredible. And as that comet approaches the sun, we're going to have pictures and gather data about what that comet is doing. But beyond NASA and Europe, we also have India. They've actually got a probe that's on its way to Mars right now. China are getting very big in space. They go about it very quietly, or rather they don't really tell us what they're doing. But they have a space station orbiting the planet right now called Tiangong-1, who was actually featured in the film Gravity at the end when Sandra Bullock finally comes across it and manages to get in an escape vehicle. It's not manned permanently at the moment, but they do keep sending astronauts up there. China have a very ambitious space plan, and the next human to land on the moon will almost certainly be Chinese. And they've stated their intention is to have humans land on the moon. within the next decade. But it's not just more countries. The really exciting area is what business is doing. And I'm going to just go through some of the examples and some of the companies and what they're doing in space right now. Now, companies have always been involved in the space race since the 1960s, but under contract to government. So NASA would say, can you build us an engine for this rocket? Can you build us this satellite? What's happening now is that companies are doing their own thing. They're saying, well, we're going to go and explore space now on our own. We'll build a spaceship. We're going to go and do all these exciting things. And they're not doing it under contract to government. They're doing it on their own free will. So lots of people are building spaceships at the moment. How many of you knew that Boeing are building a spaceship? This is the Crew Space Transportation 100, or CST-100. It's designed to carry 7 people into low Earth orbit, to ferry people to and from the International Space Station, for example. There's also a company called Sierra Nevada Corporation that's developing a spaceship called the Dream Chaser. The SpaceX are developing a crewed version of their spaceship. Bigelow's inflatable space stations. Now, you might think that sounds like a lot of hot air, but it's absolutely true. There are 2 inflatable space stations orbiting the planet right now, called Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. They're not manned. They're about the size of a bus, and they were built and launched in 2006 and 2007. The company was set up in '99 by a hotel entrepreneur called Robert Bigelow, and he is using a material, although they're inflatable, it's called Vectron, which is twice as strong as Kevlar. And it's quite an interesting concept because it's actually better at resisting impacts from space debris in orbit than, say, the space station, which is made of metal, because it's such a strong material. Here's a picture of what it might look like on the International Space Station. So they've actually got a contract with NASA to put up one of these habitats next year on the International Space Station. And it's really a test of how that technology works. But his plan is to build essentially a space hotel made up a number of these habitats, which all sort of link together as modules. And then let me go back. And then what he's doing is he's got a deal with Boeing. So he's saying, right, I'm going to build a space hotel. I need someone to bring me my guests. So he's doing a deal with Boeing, who are going to use their CST-100 spacecraft to ferry the passengers to and from his space hotel. SpaceX is a great story. I'm actually just going to go on to this next page. This here is one of my favourite ever pictures. That is SpaceX in 2002, an empty shed. Within 10 years, he had built a rocket, including all the engines, built a spaceship, and delivered cargo to the International Space Station. And the other picture is a picture of the Dragon spacecraft grappled by the arm of the International Space Station. So SpaceX was set up by Elon Musk, who founded PayPal and Tesla Motors. And he is developing lots of interesting technology. Reusable technology it's the idea of a rocket landing on its legs. So at the moment, what happens is rockets ditch down in the ocean, and it's not very reusable. It takes time to reassemble it all. So some great videos that you can see online of, including one actually just exploded last week, without anyone on board, but of these rockets that can land on their own feet. He's built a cruise ship which has already had 3 trips to the space station, and he's developing a crewed version of that also to carry astronauts to and from the space station. Reaction Engines, a little mention of a British company based outside Oxford. Reaction Engines is really about developing a revolutionary engine. The chap behind it's called Alan Bond, and there was a BBC documentary about him last year. And he's been working on this technology for about 30 years. And it's really quite incredible. And what he does is, the idea is that rather than having a rocket which has to carry lots of oxygen and with big heavy tanks, is to say, right, well, there's oxygen in the atmosphere, so let's just breathe it in to the engine. So he's developed this synergistic air-breathing rocket engine, which is a hybrid of a rocket engine and a jet engine. And the idea is it can go single stage straight into orbit, take off on a runway, and be able to go straight into space without having to jettison any rockets. The technology has been working on for 30 years. Of course, the problem is the air comes into these engines at 1,000 degrees centigrade, and he's developed the technology to cool it to minus 150 degrees centigrade in 1/100th of a second. Interestingly enough, this technology originally worked for Rolls-Royce and then British Aerospace, and then he'd filed some early patents on this technology. But this time round, he's cracked it, and he's said, I'm not even filing patents, because there's him and about 2 others in his business that know how this technology works, and he's just refusing to sort of make it public through patents. The company's been supported. I think the British government have given about 60 million. The technology has now been tested through various phases by the European Space Agency. And this is the Skylon spaceplane with these engines attached. This is an artist's illustration of what the Skylon spaceplane would actually look like. Now, going through obviously the idea is to develop this into a rocket to take satellites into orbit. If it was used for Earth point-to-point travel, it would travel at Mach 5.5. I think Concorde was under 2, so it's nearly 3 times quicker than Concorde. It'll get you to New York in about an hour. It's quite some way away. So we've seen space flight. What else is going on? If anyone's interested in going around the moon, $150 million, you can buy a ticket. That's just to go around the moon. Someone's already bought 1 ticket through a company called Space Adventures that have organised all the private space tourist travel so far. And if you want, there's another company called Golden Spike that's been set up. For 1.4 billion, you can actually go and land on the moon. So it's a bit overpriced for me, and apparently there's no positive reviews on TripAdvisor either. So I don't know about that. There is a prize at the moment called the Google Lunar X Prize, and that is basically to land something on the moon, to move 500 meters, to take and send back video and pictures to Earth. And it's a $30 million prize pot. And there's about 18 companies actually competing to do this, such as one called Moon Express, which is founded by a billionaire called Naveen Jain. And they think that by the end of next year, they're going to have a lander on the moon, sending video and pictures back to Earth. So I think this is really, just sort of shows how interesting space exploration has become, this Space 2.0, that if you were filming the moon, which I plan to do one day, you'd be able to look down on the surface and see China's U2 rover, and then next to that you could see a private American robot next to each other. So you've got that juxtaposition of states and private enterprise exploring the moon. Asteroid mining is another, it's become fashionable. There's 2 big companies that were announced the formation of in the last couple of years. And the idea is that they think some small asteroids, maybe sort of 500 meters long, might contain certain raw minerals and raw materials that are extremely valuable. So some entrepreneurs have come up with the idea that they're going to capture an asteroid and then mine it and then bring the materials back to Earth. So one of them is called Planetary Resources. You can see it's got shareholders like Larry Page. So these are no ordinary startups. These are, got billionaire funders as on the share register. And there's another one called Deep Space Industries as well that's been set up to do exactly the same thing. Now these things might take quite a long time to actually do. It might take another 10 or 15 years before they get to an asteroid and find the right asteroid. But it is quite an interesting concept that really is out of this world. So we know that private companies are going to land robots on the moon. We know that companies are planning to capture asteroids. So the type of question that this comes up with is then, what if Moon Express land on the moon, get a bit of experience, a couple of years to go back with a drill, and suddenly find there's $100 trillion worth of platinum on the moon? Who owns it? I'm not going to tell you the answer to that just yet, because I'm going to come back to that when I discuss how to govern space. But these are the type of issues that you have to start thinking about when you're looking at exploring space. So we know there's companies building spaceships. There are companies planning to mine the moon and mine asteroids. There's also a growing market in space tourism. There's two main types of space flight, if you like. There's suborbital, which basically does that. So you've not got enough power to sort of leave Earth's gravity, so you just dip your head into space for a few minutes and then land, and that's Virgin Galactic, and there's another company called Xcorp Aerospace developing a spacecraft to do that. And the other type is orbital space, where basically you launch on a rocket and escape Earth's gravity, so you're constantly falling towards Earth and orbiting the planet. Sarah Brightman is one of those that I think it's about $40 million to have an orbital trip. She's actually going to the International Space Station next year. I didn't know you could make so much money from singing. But the Virgin Galactic experience hopefully might start at some point. Richard Branson says it's going to start every year, but we're getting there, I think. He's always trying to get on the act, isn't he? Muscling in any PR opportunity, sees me and comes along. It's worth just standing back. So we see lots of things, exciting things going on in space. But why is it important? Well, I always sort of divide it up into sort of direct and indirect, really. So the direct benefits are things like your television, the smartphones, the weather forecast, the satellites, everything that's going on. It's the space economy that put it there. And it's creating a lot of jobs. There was a fantastic, I'm going to just tell you this little story. I mentioned that the European Space Agency is about to land a robot on a comet. And on Newsnight a few months ago, Jeremy Paxman was sitting there interviewing Dr. Chris Lintott, who's on the Sky at Night, and he's one of our writers and very interesting, bright chap. And Jeremy Paxman was being very sceptical and said, why are we spending hundreds of millions, that's not a very good impression, why are we spending hundreds of millions on a comet? And Chris Lintott just replied, but Jeremy, the money is spent here on Earth. So I thought that was quite a good point. Intangible benefits. So this is the other idea about perception change. It's the idea that if you look at Earth from space, you get a different perspective. There aren't any boundaries, for example, and you can see a planet covered in a lot of water, and you might start thinking, well, actually, we're one small planet orbiting a star, and maybe we should think differently about the way in which we approach things. So those are the reasons why space exploration is important. Obviously, the first is all about the space economy and the jobs and the benefits to us. The second one's a bit more my idealistic ideas about Earth government. Don't all think, oh, this sounds boring, it's international space law. It's actually a fascinating topic because really it's really about how do you actually govern space. And I'm not going to go into this in great depth, apart from Article 2, which says outer space, including the moon and other celestial bodies, is not subject to national appropriation by claim of sovereignty, whether by means of use or occupation or any other means. Now that means space is free and you can't own it. And to me, that clause, which is set out in the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, that is the foundation of real hope for a future Earth government, because you can't own space. Now, some private companies will say, well, we're not bound by this international treaty. Although, actually, interesting for an international treaty, Article 6 actually does bind countries that have ratified it. It actually binds non-governmental organisations and private individuals to it. But I won't get into the debate about that right now. But the point is, that is a real clause for hope, and it's a wonderful principle. So you can't own space. Does it? I've covered that. I'm getting things. I'm going to skip that as well. So the real issue is how do you govern space? So what we do need is we need to encourage private enterprise, because if you look at like what SpaceX has done building a rocket to take cargo to space station in 10 years, if you look at companies like Virgin Galactic trying to push the boundaries for suborbital space flight, we need the invention that private enterprise brings. But we also want to respect the international law, and so we need a regulatory framework that's going to benefit us all. So one idea is this concept of thinking of the United Nations, which has issued these various treaties, including the Outer Space Treaty 1967, is to think of that as being essentially the law-making body like the Parliament. So what we now need to think about is the idea of an executive which can maybe administer things like space flights in the same way we have an international body that organises the rules for commercial space flight. At the moment, Virgin Galactic is licensed by the Federal Aviation Administration in the States. There's talk about Virgin Galactic wanting to fly from a UK spaceport, and the UK government mentioned recently there's about 5 or 6 sites that they're looking at to do that. So it would make sense to look at standardising, the regulatory framework for space flights in the same way they do for commercial space. The final point is a bit of a lawyer one, but the thing about space law, there's no jurisprudence really at the moment. So actually, in terms of the interpretation of international space law, it's really just one lawyer saying I think it means X and another saying it means Y. And what you actually need is an international court to actually make binding rulings. So we build up some jurisprudence. SEN is my lifelong ambition really. From the age of about 18, I wanted to try and create a business without boundary in space or time, and that meant creating a space news business. And then I actually, Julie was talking about NASTAR, which when I started that in '98, it was originally called Space Internet, and that was actually going to be a space television business. And we started off hosting websites, and no one wanted video, so we started off doing more and more hosting and became a hosting business. So I took that down a different route and now started this. The idea of SEN is basically we want to, it's a subscription model, which, as we've heard, is a fantastic way to go. It's the only way content can get paid for. We're developing certain unique databases like on human spaceflight and exoplanets and moons, and publishing all this information to subscribers. My fundamental belief is original, interesting content, people are prepared to pay for it. And then what we want to start doing, obviously, in the longer term, within 10 years, is we want to be sending video cameras to film parts of the moon, other parts of the solar system, so you get high-definition video from the orbit of Mars, for example, on the back of other robots and orbiters that are going there to do science. We can get some high-definition video technology into doing that and relay that back to Earth and monetize that in a way through a subscription model. If you have a look at sen.com and you're all desperate to subscribe, just hold off for a week or two, because there's a month's free offer coming up in a couple of weeks' time. And I think that's, we're a little bit late for time, so I think that's me, and that's all I've got to say about the future of space.
I've lost my microphone. Hold on 1 second. Will there be microphones in space, or do you not need microphones in space?
You do need them because sound doesn't travel through space, so you actually, but you don't need them inside a space station.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic. So why at age 18 did you have this vision of going to space? What was going on? How did you have this kind of thing that you had to do?
Well, I was always fascinated by space anyway from being a kid, and when I was growing up, I thought I want to create a business that's constructive and useful. And I sort of thought, I don't want to just create something that's fashionable or that's going to come and go. I want to try and create something that's lasting, that can go on forever. So I became obsessed about this idea of filming space and how satellites could then robotically make other satellites, and we can carry on filming the stars and space and sort of create almost like recreate the universe in an electronic digital format. And I thought, if we're reporting news, it doesn't really matter whether it's good or bad. It's just it's something that will always keep going on forever. I know it sort of sounds mad, but that's where the idea came from.
Excellent.
So.
And how big do you think this can be? Sen?
It's a really popular topic in space. I mean, there's millions of people around the world. I think if people are passionate about anything, whether it's football or Formula One or any sport, you follow it with a passion, and space followers are very, very passionate. There are space websites out there like space.com, which get 5 million people a month looking at it. And I know that science programs like Wonders of the Solar System was on it's been on the UK and Canada and USA is getting 9-10 million viewers. So I think there's in terms of how many people are going to pay for a subscription, I think there's 1 million plus people would pay for a subscription.
Excellent. Any questions for Charles? We've got a question right there. Please get a microphone to our friend. Introduce yourself if you would,
Yeah,
please.
Tobias Reichmuth from Suzy Partners. That was great, very interesting. I have two questions. One, can you tell us a bit about Omega-3? I read a book about that, so there might be on the moon, like with a lot of energy inside. And two, what I don't understand really, if it's so difficult today for the Chinese to land on the moon, how was it possible for the Americans in 1968? Conspiracy theory and so on. Would you say they have been there or not?
I don't. The first question, omega-3, that's sort of oils and stuff, isn't it, that you get in fish?
Yeah, well, you know, I read some books about it should be like the sun energy, basically put energy in the sand, and you could get a lot out of that somehow. But well, if you haven't heard about them, probably it's really just from books.
Okay, I'm not sure on that one. In terms of the second question, we've definitely been to the moon. There have been, you can see pictures that the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter has taken of the Apollo sites. You can even see the tracks that the moon buggy made. But if you're still unsure, I am going to get some videos taken of that one day, if you wait about a decade. And I think it was quite incredible, the Apollo program, how they managed to get to the moon so quickly as well. If you think the first space flight was April 1961, and if you think within 8 years, July 1969, we were landing on the moon, it was quite incredible rate of progress. And I just think that ideological battle, I think they put a lot of money in, created a lot of jobs. I think there's something like 40,000 people working on it. It was the whole sort of country, almost like a war effort devoted to developing the technology. It's hard to know how quickly China are developing the technology. Every step that they are making that we see seems to be very well executed, like the space station, and then they've had several crewed missions now up to their space station, Tiangong-1. And they released a document in December 2011 saying this is our 10-year plan and we are going to land a human on the moon. I think they will.
Is there another question here? Last question, please, right there.
Thank you. Lawrence Marazzi, Agility Global. Great talk, thanks for that. Two questions really sort of combined in one. How significant do you think ESA's report on reaction engines was? And do you think they have the momentum to sort of go all the way, or will they be picked up by one of the big hitters, US, China, India, somebody come along and really fund that through? Because it seems to be it's all there to play for, but we're small in that sector here in the UK.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. This is about Reaction Engines, the company I mentioned that's developed this Sabre revolutionary engine. So they've been through various ESA tests which all sort of give a green light to developing the technology to the next stage. And the British government's invested about 60 million in the project. And I think it's still quite a way off in terms of the development and certainly developing the Skylon space plane. It's one of those that you look at and you think, if that really is true, why don't we just give them £1 billion and get it done? Because you could license that technology to Boeing and to Rolls-Royce around the world and make 50 times that really easily if this really does work like that. But that's easy for me to say, but I'm not the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And I think the American government now have suddenly got interest in the technology. There's a memorandum of understanding and exploration being signed between Reaction Engines now and a military branch of the US government. So they're starting to sit up and look at the technology and go, this looks quite interesting actually. So we'll have to see how it plays out. Obviously they're funded for now, but it's one of those where you just think, yeah, they're certainly thinking big. What is it going to take to actually build this thing and make it real? Because all the tests so far say this is going to work and it's going to absolutely be revolutionised. Not just space travel, but air travel if it's applied to commercial air travel. So it's a really interesting company to watch, Reaction Engines.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your vision of the future of space. Would you please thank Charles Black?
Thank you.
So it's rather fitting, having just discussed space, and which all started with the vision of putting a man on the moon, because that is so much really what we would say about the future of following the entrepreneur. What does it take to do anything? Put an entrepreneur in charge. And isn't it great that we don't need to put them in charge, but that they feel compelled to solve problems. And as we've been talking about today, in so many respects, they solve social problems as well as business problems, and the two kind of are deeply intertwined. And so I'm going to sum up just really briefly here what I think the future of following the entrepreneur is, because since we created it, we get to decide what the future is. First of all, we're going to invite you all back next year for the 5th year anniversary of Follow the Entrepreneur, and to keep on expanding the program. But a couple of the themes that you will hear, and you have heard, and you will hear more of, and we'll keep on putting more and more granularity into these themes. We really believe that David and Goliath must dance, that it's in this dance that great things happen. And right now, in the kind of part of the cycle that we're in, that it's the cooperation of David and Goliath which is creating these ecosystem economics. That this is really the vision of the future, which is for non-technology traditional businesses, the way that they can play in the digital age is to imitate the digital winners, and to do that in cooperation with the digital Davids. We have said for many years that we think that technology is a layer which is transforming all industries, but as you've heard today, finance is also a layer which is transforming all industries. And tied to that, it's the focus on data. If you say, well, what are you investing in with your Ariadne Capital investment platform? We're really investing in the data value chain applied to different industries. We believe that data, your data, is your asset. And if you kind of extrapolate that out to a kind of global world population, if that really were the case, that everybody on the planet has an asset, it's their data, whether that's health data, financial data, or any other kind of data, they start with the basics around which to earn money, because all services are going to be based on that data in the future. And of course, you wouldn't call a conference Follow the Entrepreneur unless you believe that actually capital follows ideas. And we only have to look back in history to see that it's the job of the capital provider to follow the people with the ideas who are executing those ideas. As a capital provider, it's my job to find the industrialists of the day and to back those people to get their ideas into full fruition. Hopefully you met my new friend in my neighborhood, David Barry, who's building with Wild Blue Cohort, just something that I think is just fantastic, an investment group to solve social problems locally, with some involvement, maybe a whole lot less involvement from the government, and really this whole shared economy, sort it out, get it done locally, don't look for or wait for the government to solve every problem. Tied to that, a kind of implicit, I think, definition of what leadership is. You know, most people in the world are just kind of worried about their own stuff. They're worried about their own self-interest. But leaders, and we've invited you here today because we believe your leaders are people who believe that other people's self-interest is our self-interest. And so rather than a kind of tragedy of the commons, we're actually building the commons. We're saying that it's in all of our interest to care about the greater good. A number of speakers today talked on trust and how they were obsessed with trust. And I remember when I set up my last business, the kind of operating mantra was trust is efficient. And as we this week have brought in all of our Entrepreneur Country regional partners into London from all across Europe, Middle East, and Africa, I had a big deja vu moment of the first time that I did that with First Tuesday. And so I kind of thought about that. I thought the only way that we can have licensing agreements out the yin-yang, but really, actually, at the end of the day, it'll be trust which will drive this network. And trust truly is efficient. And I was so pleased to hear again and again how much that has been the kind of obsessional foundation of so many of the businesses on stage today. And when we're dealing with things like money, there was this implicit discussion around power. And we see that So much of the world is still built on power over people rather than empowering people. And implicitly what entrepreneurs do and what technology does is it puts the tools to empower people into the hands of the individual. And that's, again, one of the key things that we believe. That if we had to sum up everything that this conference is about, is that we have a vision for society and the world. And that vision is that society works best when it's organized around the entrepreneur, because entrepreneurs are some of the most generous people that you'll ever meet. I'm sure you had the same feeling that I did as I was listening to some of the great entrepreneurs on stage today. There are so many ways that they could make more money, right? There's so many ways that they could personally create more wealth for themselves, but they have this kind of generosity gene, and as Jose said as he was leaving, any way I can help you and so forth. Every entrepreneur feels that way. They've been helped along the way. They have had their share of near-death experiences, and it's because somebody helped them that they said, you know what, I got to throw some goodwill back into the universe because, you know, that goodwill was there for me when I needed it. And there's a belief that we have to create wealth because actually we need to, the best vision of sustainability is profitability and wealth creation. So a couple of big thank yous. I'm so pleased that out of my 60 or so founding shareholders, I've got 5, God, I hope I haven't forgotten anyone today, but I've got 5 with me today that showed up today. These people, they gave me money at the beginning and backed me and have given me enormous support, introducing me to people, ideas, partners, and so forth. So thank you, Wilf Eaton, Paul Barry Walsh, John Redford, Michele Appendino, Stefan Rover. Very big thank you to IBM. We have Alessandro La Volpe, many people from IBM, and of course Sandy Carter, who despite having had this injury flew in from the States to really announce our founding global partnership with IBM and Entrepreneur Country. Thank you so much for Vikram. Where's Vikram? Vikram Anand, there he is right there. Vikram and I had the good fortune, it's so important who you sit next to at dinners, as we'll all see tonight, and I had the good fortune to sit next to Vikram many moons ago. We kind of concocted this whole plan to do Follow the Entrepreneur together. And of course, Philip Harris, who when I said to Philip, shall we do this together, he kind of said yes in 17 seconds. So thank you to Royal Bank of Canada for having paid the check to bring this all together. And I want to thank, you'll be hearing from us over the weekend, just with the kind of note consolidating all of the great entrepreneurs that you had the good fortune to hear on stage today. But we had Alex Cheadle of 10 UK. We had Richard and Benjamin from Orson, Looms, the future of publishing, Marcus Swanpool of BitX, the emerging market Bitcoin exchange, Gavin Littlejohn of Money Dashboard. And also in the audience, we couldn't fit everybody on stage today. We had other entrepreneurs that I want to draw your attention to. Have Lawrence from Agility Global, the Tesla of motorbikes. His vision is enormous, and you'll be hearing more from Agility. We had John Booth of Midpoint, peer-to-peer FX exchange. We had Ed Bussey of Quill, who's building out a content platform. And Luca Peperi of DXI, which is a contact center software. And we'll be putting that again into a note to send out to all of you, because I know there was a lot of interest in backing the entrepreneurs that we have identified. And friends of ours also that spoke from First Artist Bank, Art Advantage, and then Henry Wynand, who very successfully has taken Intelligent Energy public on the London Stock Exchange. I want to thank the Ariadne and Entrepreneur Country team, everybody who worked so tirelessly to make this happen, and all of you for coming in and sharing your day with us. It's been truly wonderful. I know I get so much energy and oxygen out of these days. Thank you so much, and I really look forward to seeing you soon, but more importantly, Toot Sweet, I hope at 7 o'clock you'll join us for a drink here to celebrate all of the great stories and news. Thank you so much for coming this year.